It is wrong fundamentally, and the American people know it's wrong.
When people think of the best investor in the world, the person who knows the stock market best, they often think of Warren Buffett. Buffett regularly beats the market with his investments, netting about a 19% return, which is pretty good. If you put your money in an index fund, you'll often get about 10% a year. So Warren Buffett nearly doubles that. Not bad. But there is one group that beats the market by even wider margins, taking in massive profits. They aren't math geniuses, they aren't experts in statistics, and they aren't using an algorithm developed by some tech startup. And they don't work at a stock exchange on the trading floor. They work here, on the floor of Congress. They're your elected representatives, and they are beating the market by margins that make even Warren Buffett look like an absolute chump. We get questions from you, our audience, quite a lot about how members of Congress get so rich. After all, they have a fixed salary. They can't have a bunch of income on the side or just have another job. Turns out, the answer is a little boring. It's mostly be rich already before you're elected to Congress, have a rich spouse, and maybe write a weird book. But there's another big part of the answer, and it's all of this. Play the stock market and do it better than almost anyone else. So how are members of Congress doing this? Did we accidentally elect generationally talented stock traders? Or is something else happening here beneath the surface? This is a look at how members of Congress get rich through some of their most suspicious recent stock trades and what, if anything, can be done about it.
And the reason for all of this is that, quite frankly, members of this body are privy to information that the normal person just is not.
So again, we have plenty of protections. We have the disclosure. This is a completely unnecessary piece of legislation.
We signed up for this job. We knew what the pay was. It isn't a, we're going to pay you this much plus corruption.
I don't know how many people in the audience, how many of you don't want to make money? Anybody want to be poor? I don't.
I'm going to take you back to February 2020. At this point, nobody in the public really knows just how bad this whole coronavirus thing would be. But if you were a US Senator who sits on the Intelligence and Health Committees, like Richard Burr, who gets confidential briefings on threats to the US, you might have a pretty good idea of what's coming. Publicly, at the time, Burr seemed confident that this COVID situation wasn't that bad, that the US was ready. On February 7th, he wrote an op-ed for Fox News saying just as much. But on February 13th, just a day later, Burr was dumping his entire portfolio, selling off a ton of stock, potentially up to $1.7 million worth. But here's the thing, he did all of this while the market was at an all-time high. Why would he do that? Maybe because he was receiving closed-door briefings telling him that this virus was going to be bad for the US economy in a big way. Soon after, the market did crash, the economy did shut down, and Senator Burr miraculously dodged the financial ruin that many of his constituents felt at that time. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, that sounds like it should be illegal, I had the same reaction, and you would be right, sort of. You see, in the United States, we have laws against what we call insider trading.
The buying and selling of stock by corporate insiders who have access to non-public information that could affect the stock price can be a criminal offense.
Now, I don't work for the FBI, but to my untrained eye, this looks a lot like a politician using his insider knowledge to dump his entire stock portfolio before a market crash, all while assuring the public that everything was okay. Apparently, the FBI disagreed because after conducting an investigation, all charges were dropped against Senator Burr and they found no wrongdoing. He got off completely scot-free, which is shocking to me. We have a specific law against insider trading just for members of Congress. It's called the Stock Act. Stop trading on congressional knowledge. Cute, I know. But to me, this law looks like it doesn't work at all. Because here's the thing, Senator Burr, he's not the exception. To better understand how widespread this issue is, and if one party is doing it more than the other, I sat down with Chris Kardatsky of Quiver Quantitative, a company that uses alternative public data sources to help retail investors make better decisions. Because apparently, one of the best ways to do that is by tracking members of Congress.
Last year, we launched a portfolio on an app called Autopilot. Every month, it buys stock in the companies that are being bought the most by members of Congress. And since we've launched that last year, it's risen around 33%, I believe, whereas the market is up around 24% over the same time frame.
Is either political party worse on this? Does one party trade more than the other one?
We haven't seen any sort of lean one way or the other. We see suspicious trades on both sides of the aisle.
Are there any other examples of trades that you've been watching recently that you could walk us through?
Back in November, we noticed Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz buying stock in a company called Viasat. And it really caught our eye because it was the first time we'd seen her buy the stock, and it was the first time we'd seen any member buy the stock.
Okay, so Debbie Wasserman Schultz sits on the Appropriations Committee and the Subcommittee on Military Construction. That's not a good look right off the bat.
And then in December, it was announced that Viasat would be awarded part of like a $4 billion NASA contract, and the stock just rose.
Looks like they got another big contract also with the Department of Defense right after the NASA contract.
A couple years ago, we saw Representative Susie Lee buy stock in a company called Rheinmetall.
Rheinmetall?
Which is a German defense contractor, which, I mean, that rang alarm bells for us because it's like, it was a stock we hadn't really seen any members trade before, and obviously very tied into U.S. defense policy.
Looks like they're doing a lot of work with the Army lately. Tank modernization, I bet there's big money in that.
Susie Lee sat on a committee on military construction, and since then the stock's risen like, I think 250%. Last year we saw Senator Markwayne Mullin buy stock in a company called Badger Meter, which really caught our attention because Badger Meter makes automated water meters, and Senator Markwayne Mullin sits on the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, and we learned that the EPA had recently passed a mandate basically encouraging cities to switch to automated water meters. The year following the trade, Badger Meter stock rose around 40% before Senator Markwayne Mullin closed his position. In April of this year, we saw Marjorie Taylor Greene buying up stock in dozens of different companies, and a lot of them were companies which we hadn't seen her buy before, and we hadn't seen almost any members of Congress buy before. So there's one company which stood out to us in particular, which was Restoration Hardware, which I'd heard of just days earlier when the stock price had plummeted following like the Liberation Day tariff announcements. That was when Marjorie Taylor Greene decided she wanted to buy the stock. And then over the next, I think, week, when the tariff announcements started to get rolled back, the stock rose like 30%. I think by our estimates in total, she made around $100,000 off of all of those trades she made during the tariff dip. She's claimed that those trades were made by her financial advisor.
Guess what he did? He bought the dip, and that's what anybody that has any financial sense does when they know the market's going to be going down.
I mean, this tariff chaos stuff is crazy. 55 days, 2,200 trades, millions and millions of dollars. Are members of Congress just day traders?
We've been seeing a lot of crypto trades recently.
President Trump is also taking a victory lap today, signing into law the first ever major federal cryptocurrency legislation.
Trading meme coins in general definitely raises an eyebrow.
This all feels so obvious.
Okay, let's stop there. After talking to Chris about these trades, I was a little confused and honestly pretty frustrated. I have to wonder, how is nobody going to jail for this?
Insider trading is really hard to prove. You need to show not only did somebody have material, non-public information that could have informed a particular stock trade, you need to show that they made the stock trade because of that information. So in the rare instances where we do see members of Congress getting convicted of insider trades, it's usually because they made a phone call to somebody or they wrote a text or sent an email.
Okay, so maybe we can't prove insider trading in any of these cases, but
Even if you don't buy this story that I'm telling you, even if you think that members of Congress are some of the most talented stock traders in the world, without backgrounds in finance and without trading on insider information, I would say two things. One, even the appearance of trading on insider information is a bad look. It erodes public trust in government. And two, members of Congress holding massive amounts of stock in American companies will likely impact their behavior, consciously or unconsciously. According to the data that we looked at, Democrats love owning tech stocks. I'm talking NVIDIA, Google, Apple, Palantir. It's all over these disclosures. So is it any wonder that we have such a hard time regulating these massive tech companies in the United States? Why would members of Congress vote against their own portfolios? Members of Congress should not be allowed to own stock in the companies that they are tasked to regulate. And it turns out the vast majority of Americans agree with this sentiment. Even the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, thinks congressional trading should be banned.
I mean, I'm in favor of that because I don't think we should have any appearance of impropriety here, okay? But the other side of it, some people say, Well, look, you know, the salary of Congress has been frozen since 2009. You know, when you adjust for inflation, a member of Congress today is making 31% less than they made in that year.
Although I'm a little less sympathetic than he is for the poor members of Congress who need sketchy trading to get by on their meager $174,000 per year salary, which is more than double the average American household, by the way. Even the president said that he would sign a ban on congressional stock trading if it was to land on his desk. So what's the holdup? Well, it turns out there's a lot of disagreement on what an actual solution looks like.
And you can see that reflected in the debates in Congress about stock trading this summer.
I sold all my marketable securities. I converted to cash. That hasn't done real well.
People don't believe that we are here for the right reasons. We have a problem.
Okay. We're going to break down the three camps for you.
The first camp thinks there's no problem, that members of Congress aren't insider trading, that the Stock Act works just fine.
Would you vote for a ban on Congress members trading stocks?
Yeah, I mean, this is like number 1,000 on my priority list of things to care about. This is one of those stupid things that I've been dragged through the mud on. You know how much fucking money I've ever had in the stock market? About $20,000, and yet I've been dragged through the mud on this as if like there's some insider trading.
I need to make a call real quick.
Hey, this is Christopher.
Hey, Chris, it's Trevor. I'm just wondering, how much does Dan Crenshaw have in the market?
So we currently estimate that Dan Crenshaw has around $76,000 in stocks. A couple years ago, he had probably upwards of $150,000 or $180,000.
The second camp thinks that there definitely is a problem. They want a ban on congressional stock trading, and they think that family members of these elected representatives should probably be banned from trading stocks too.
Our job is to try to anticipate and legislate for what we see is coming. And we should not have the ability to both have access to that information and be able to hold and trade individual stock.
The third camp is more mixed. They think that there is a problem, but they don't think that family members should be banned from trading stocks, or they think it might be okay for members of Congress to use blind trusts for their investments. So until more members of Congress coalesce around one of these camps, we're kind of stuck.
And the reason for all of this is that, quite frankly, members of this body are privy to information that the normal person just is not.
So again, we have plenty of protections. We have the disclosure. This is a completely unnecessary piece of legislation. It's going to create all kinds of unintended consequences.
I don't know how many people in the audience, how many of you don't want to make money? Anybody want to be poor? I don't.
There have been 19 bills that I could find in the House and Senate that have been introduced. Not a single one of them has been brought to a full floor vote. Now instead, we're busy arguing about whether or not the president and the vice president should be included in the ban, which of course they should. The current system isn't working. Sure, members of Congress have to disclose their trades now. So we're not really stopping this troubling behavior, we're just putting a timestamp on it. They're doing it out in the open. The Stock Act has clearly failed. It hasn't restored public trust in our elected officials. But you know what might help? A ban. If you'll excuse me, until then, I'm gonna have to go put my savings in one of those trackers that follows Nancy Pelosi's stock trades. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked that story, be sure to like and subscribe so you get more Perfect Union directly in your feed. And if you have ideas for stories that you would like us to investigate, be sure to drop them in the comments below.